Welcome back, everyone. I'm here today with Candice Burt. Hello, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming on with me today. You have recently just broke the record for 200 ultras in 200 days, which is absolutely astonishing. Was that ever kind of your plan when you were setting off on that first day? Was that your plan to do the 200 days?
Well, kind of. So I did plan to go after the world record for most consecutive days of ultramarathons. And at the time, the record was 22 days. So I looked back because I applied for the Guinness record at the end of October and I started November 5th. And I looked back and I said I was going to do 100 days. So I just doubled it. That's all. I doubled what I thought I was going to maybe do.
Amazing. I saw on your blog, I was like, wow, the record was like 20 days and now she's just like smashed it out of the ball. That's absolutely amazing. So what was your background in running? You obviously didn't just get up one morning and decide to run an ultra every day. What was your kind of background leading up to that?
Well, I've been doing ultras since 2010, so quite a few years, and I really have been running for 26 years. And I think having that background, like 26 years, was pretty necessary. I can't really see having gone in early as a runner and being able to withstand that level of volume. Because I kept asking myself, like, how is it possible that my body's adapting with this much stress being put on it day after day after day? There's 0 days off, and you only have so many hours before the next one. It's like you finish the ultra, and it's like all of a sudden time speeds up, and you're like, oh no, like I'm gonna have to start again tomorrow.
So on your blog, you put, I want to get as close to failure as possible, then succeed. This is a really powerful quote. Do you want to tell me more about it? Where did that come from?
Well, it kind of developed through the process of what I went through. And what I realized as I was doing all those ultras day after day is you really have to play that line of like failure. And I think that's probably true for so many things in life. You know, you have to court failure back and forth. And as you get closer to failure, you got to push back. And that's what our body's doing when we put the stress of training on it. You know, you could stress it so much that it breaks, and you could stress it just enough that it's able to recalibrate its ability to kind of withstand that kind of training. So I think as runners, we always kind of want to play the line a little bit, especially if we're trying to get more gains. And so certainly what I did isn't really a training technique. It's more of like, hey, there's a brick wall. I'm going to just throw myself into it over and over. And like, oh, okay, you know, the brick wall broke. Good. I survived. But you know, there's consequences, you know, to playing that line. But I like it because I think it really applies to ultra runners. You know, we start something with not necessarily a great idea of whether or not we're going to be able to complete it. That's any ultra, no matter how good you are, what runner you are, you have to go into it with that perspective of like, I could fail, you know. And failure is more of like, seeing it as failure is more of a short timeline. If you look in the long timeline, quitting a race could just mean that you've quit it for now, but then you try it next year and you finish. So what is success, you know, when you look at it that way?
Wow, that's amazing. So you ran around 50 kilometers every day for the 200 days. What was that kind of like the set plan, or did you originally plan to do more or less?
Yeah, so the minimum that you could do for the world record, there's very specific rules. So the minimum you could do is 31.06. And I thought, well, I don't want to get too close to that because, like, what if, you know, they take my GPX track and they plug it into their system and it reads low, you know, or what? I wasn't sure how they go through that verification. So I thought, you know, probably smart to do as close to 32 miles as possible. So I started out with like, okay, 32 miles. And then as I kind of developed through it, my very minimum that one watch could read was 31.5. So most of them landed somewhere between zero point 0.5 and 32, 31.5 and 32.
What
Oh, cool.
were some of your highlights? I know that's kind of a big question, but through those 200 days, what were some of like your biggest moments?
Oh man, it's funny because like the biggest moments are probably like some of the most at the time terrible moments, you know, but there were some really joyous occasions as well. So I'd say, you know, somewhere around 30 days, I'd gotten through like extreme shin pain, and I remember having this realization of like, oh, I'm breaking through, not breaking. So what felt like breaking early on in like week 2, 3, suddenly was like, you know, I'm up on a new plateau. I overcame that. And it was an incredible moment of like, and I've kind of repeated that throughout the streak of like, you know, the point is to break through, not break. And so I like that kind of mantra. And then getting frostbite was kind of a fun little um, well, you know, I say that because it's like, it's one of those things where it seems really horrible in the moment. And then what I realized through the frostbite as well was that my body is in a revved up healing state because I'm doing so many miles, and things are just, they have to just be rolling along in terms of the healing. And so from the point of like my toe being, half of it being black, and healing was 2 weeks. So it went from like the black to turning fully white, full on blister, like the whole toe. And then, and like the nail was popped out, you know, it was just disgusting. And then, but then it sucked itself back in, and it was like the skin was reattached, and then the skin peeled off, and it was like a baby, perfect baby pink. Like not like raw, but like it was like I had brand new baby skin under there. So I felt like I got really lucky. And then I think my favorite moment, other than finishing number 200 with my family and friends, was during the Hurt 100, coming through that finish line, because I really wasn't sure if I was going to be able to like do a 100-miler and run. You know, I ran a 50K the day before and like every day before and then after. But yeah, lots of incredible moments, honestly. It was like too much, like sped up into 200 days.
So that kind of led really well into my next question. Over those kind of 6.5 months, you went through winter and then into springtime. So what were kind of some of the necessities that you had to maybe swap and change through those periods? Were your shoes different? Were the routes different? I know you're in Colorado, so kind of maybe, you know, were you snowed in at some point? Like, what was that all like?
Man, it's so good I didn't know how hard the winter running was going to be before I started, because we had one of the heaviest and hardest winters that Colorado's seen in like 10, 20 years. At least that's what people tell me, because I'm kind of new here. So it was a little bit of a rude awakening. I would say, you know, I ended up really carrying a lot more than I expected each day. So I would wear like the Solomon race vest, and I would put, there would be a very light down jacket in it. So we're talking like 6, 8 ounces of a down jacket, because you need to be able to like self-rescue, you know, especially if you're going out there and you're going to be 15 miles out. So I would take that, often a very lightweight, the Z-Packs, rain pants and jacket. Again, they're each, I think, like 6 ounces. So try to keep it like to just a couple pounds of gear, but having like those core things in case I got really cold out there. I wouldn't have to, because, you know, like if I'm 15 miles out and I didn't bring the right gear, I can't just call for a ride. Like, or, you know, I mean, I guess if I had somebody who could bring me stuff, that would be allowed, but I can't go get a ride and stop the run. So I had to like really be prepared. And then sometimes spikes if there was a lot of ice, but I actually found that for the most part, most of the snow was soft enough that I could just run. And I was running in almost always road shoes. So I I transitioned from, I normally would wear ultras, but the padding wasn't enough. And with that kind of mileage, I ended up going to, it's going to sound weird, but I went to marathon racing shoes. So the Nike Alpha Fly have these just huge soles, and it was perfect for not for winter running. It wasn't perfect, but I kind of managed. You keep your center of gravity over your feet pretty well, and you aren't going to fall. I think the only time I really slipped and almost fell, I was running with a friend, and I got distracted and I stepped right on the ice, and she was so scared. She was like, "You have to be way more careful." I was like, "Normally I am." But it's like, yeah, I actually, the only times I slipped and fell were on trail when I would just catch a toe. Well, and a few times on pavement in Hawaii, but yeah, so the marathon racing shoes kind of worked for me. And once you find something that fits for your foot, you're not getting blisters, you're not getting too much wear and tear. It's just good to stick with it. So I would be running on trails with those. I saw a few videos, people were covering my runs and they go, and she's wearing the Nike Alpha Fly. What? It makes no sense.
I know.
But I was like, they're comfortable.
Yeah, I suppose you kind of need to choose comfort over anything else when you're covering that sort of distance every day. So
Yeah.
everything else kind of flies out the window. So you did complete the Hurt 100 in January in Hawaii. How did you feel that particular day? Were you quite anxious or were you feeling quite fearless because you'd had all of this kind of 50K training behind you, but you also knew you had so much further to go? So how were you kind of in that period?
Oh boy, as I got closer to the race, it was kind of what we're talking about, where I'm straddling the line between failure and success. And I had a lot of like different pain that would crop up all over especially my right leg. And so I was pretty worried that something was going to become an issue injury wise. So as I got closer, I realized kind of what I got myself into. And started to think maybe it was a mistake. But I do the Hurt 100 almost every year. So to me, it was like I didn't want to do this world record if I couldn't also do other things in my life, because I was doing it for a while. So I kind of embraced that and tried to accept and know that I had to go slower. Like there was no racing other competitors this year. So I think that was good that I accepted that in advance. It was a finish, I could enjoy it for that. But it was really, looking back, it was really risky because like it could have easily ended the streak. And then I might not even finish the race. But yeah, it added a pretty hard dynamic right there in the midst of it.
So what was an average day for you, like nutrition wise? I bet you were eating absolutely loads because I know I eat loads on an ultra. And what was kind of the routine like? And how could you fit it all in, kind of, because you are a mom as well?
Yes. So I was working, taking care of my kids and running. Sorry for the dogs. And I have 4 dogs. Yeah, so a regular day would be probably getting, I try to get somewhere between 6 and 7 hours of sleep. I don't think that was totally ideal, but with everything else on my plate, it was the most I could do. So I'd get up at like 6 or 7, and then I would start the run right after my kids go to school, or they go around 8. So I'd start the run between like 8 and 9 usually. And then I would finish. The runs would typically take like 5 to 7 hours if I was just doing my typical route. Again, there's a lot of variation within that. But so I would get home before they got back from school. It was kind of the perfect situation. And on the run, I would make some work phone calls. So that I was like checking in and making sure. I organized a bunch of events. So we're working full time all year round. But a lot of the work I did had to be done like over the phone. And some of it got, handed off to like different employees. But yeah, so I would do a little work as I ran like the first 6 miles or 12 sometimes for hour and a half. And then I would get home and kind of prep dinner, take my shoes off. And so I'd be dealing with like some rehab, some prepping dinner. And then I'd sit down with the kids and have dinner, do a little more rehab if I had to, or stretch, just different stuff. Especially at first, I had to do a lot of calming down certain muscles. If I had tendonitis, I was like working on those muscles. But as I went along, I got to the point where I almost had to do 0. Which is pretty cool. Yeah, near the last few months. But that was pretty typical the first 4 months. Yeah, because I went for almost 7 some months. So yeah, that would be a typical day. And then I would try to turn off my lights. It usually wouldn't be till like midnight. So I would work like emails and stuff late into the evening if need be.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
lots of eating within that time. Like I
yeah.
would eat before, during, and then after I would really try to knock down I probably got most of my calories between the time I finished and then I would be eating all the way up until I went to bed. So getting a lot of calories that my body could process as I was sleeping even was important because otherwise you continually will lose weight. And that would have been really detrimental to doing something like this.
What sort of changes did you see, like, to your body and to maybe your psychology almost? You know, it's quite, you know, I know that one ultra can kind of get me into a spin sometimes. So doing it day after day, what sort of changes did you see within yourself?
Um, I would say like at first I didn't notice much, and all of a sudden, because I'm wearing all these winter clothes, all of a sudden I noticed like I lost a lot of body fat. And so I started to get worried that I might be losing too much. And you know, if I was feeling moody or like not enough energy, I would really work harder to be eating, even if I had to slow down the pace and just be eating more during the runs. When you're running that much day after day, sometimes you do have to take, like, you can't just eat gels the whole 50K. So you have to be eating real food. I think it would be bad for your teeth. It would be bad for your body to not be eating like more nutritious things on a regular basis. So it really worked in, like, I got it so that I could pre-order a bagel from the bagel shop and I would run almost 10 miles there, eat that whole thing. And then, you know, as I was walking and then continue to run without getting sick. So I had like a great routine of like trying to find like cool locations to run to that I could pre-order food because you can't stop for very long during it. It's supposed to be a continuous run. Yeah, so my body, I lost a lot of body fat, but I'm not sure how much because I don't typically weigh myself on a regular basis, but I did at a certain point to make sure I wasn't losing weight. But I definitely lost some, just like a through hiker would, doing that many miles. And I felt like I was, and still like more muscular. But I was able to like maintain my hormonal levels. I was still having a period. So I think I was successful in like making sure I got enough nutrients because the last thing I wanted to do, it sounds weird because it's so many miles that people think that you're going to destroy your body, but that was what I didn't want to do. And I think I managed, like, I feel really good now. And it's kind of weird. Like, how is that possible?
um
Oh.
you said that in your blog as well. You're like, I could have carried on, but I promised that I'd only do 200 miles.
Yeah.
You've mentioned your family. Were they a real great support system for you? Did any of them come out at any point with you on the runs?
Yeah. So I have two teenage daughters. They're 15 and 18. And one of them, she will run with me on occasion, but she's more like a 1 to 2 mile kind of a distance. So I think overall though, like because it was through the winter, they were like, nah, we're good. We'll stay at home. Most people didn't want to go out in that. But yeah, they were supportive. Like my older daughter likes making dinners. So she would make, she loves like things with an Asian twist. So she would throw together stuff like that. And they kind of understood, like I wasn't as on top of things like chores in the house, and so they would help a little bit more from time to time with that. But yeah, I mean, I think like by the end, my younger daughter was like, Mom, you could just keep going if you want. And I was like, well, don't you want to do some stuff this summer? Because the hardest part was like, I didn't get weekends off. So I had to start really early on a weekend for us to get to do something because we would hang out with friends later, maybe in town. But my energy level just wasn't there. So I wanted to make sure that like I had the summer to spend with them, and that I was able to put more time into work. Because there's kind of if you can imagine like running that much, there's a pile of work that kind of grew that wasn't super important, but now it is.
Um,
Yeah.
how do you hope to inspire other female athletes to enter the ultramarathon distances?
That's a great question. I mean, I think one of the cool things about records is that we can inspire people to see what's possible. I mean, what I did, I think, is achievable to anybody that, is willing to sacrifice that amount of time or more time per day. But it even shows us, I think, that like, well, maybe I could do a shorter streak. You know, you mentioned a 5K streak. Something like that can give us a lot of like me time, especially, you know, as moms, or people who might want to, you know, be a mom in their future. I think it's really important for us to take that time for ourselves. And running gives us that kind of meditation movement, the time to reset, come back, and then, you know, be more present with our family. It's just a, you know, as a parent, it's just one of those things that I think a lot of moms feel guilty about. And if you have a consistency, you've said, you know, I'm going to do this many miles per day, whether it be 1, you know, or 2 or 3, it'll allow you to kind of be more present in other parts of your life. So hopefully it makes people realize, like, you know, if I could do a 50K, like you can do a 5K or something like that. But we'd also love, you know, as a woman, I'd love to see more women getting into ultras, that it is something we can fit within our lives. I think it would be amazing to see kind of a growth in that area.
Definitely. So you did break the record by 177 days. How did it feel on that 200th day when you set off? What was kind of the feeling?
It it's so weird because it wasn't like that big, like, woohoo 200 that I expected. It was almost like I had drawn it out for so long that I was like, okay, here I am. I think there's a little, like, a more of the feeling was like it was a goodbye to that part of my life. I was like leaving that world, because it did feel like while I was doing this that I had entered a different world, and there was kind of this outside world that I wasn't as much of a part of because I had to focus so much on it. So I think for me, 200 was a little bit of like, okay, you know, I'm done accepting that change. And it's a really good change, but it's weird to make such a big transition back into life. But it was great because having, you know, a handful of friends there and my family, it, you know, it felt like kind of the perfect way to celebrate what was mostly a solo endeavor.
Wonderful. So what's next? Kind of what's on your radar for the next 6 months? How many days did you give yourself off before you kind of started going on to your next adventures?
Well, I had so much fun doing a run streak, and I want to continue to be part of the run streak community, that I decided to continue the run streak. My minimum each day is 5 miles. So that's kind of high for a minimum, but we'll see how it goes. So I haven't taken a day off, although to me, a 5 mile run is totally a day off. Compare, you know, it's like, it seems like very little, and I could take the dogs out or something. But anyway, I kind of did a reverse taper, so I went from, you know, 50Ks to marathon to 20 miles to 15, and it was a nice, I think, more mentally than anything, just to kind of allow myself, okay, getting back into it slowly. So I am training for the Leadville 100, which is kind of a local race. I live close to there, so I'm excited that I can do something without too much travel. And then next year, I'm hoping to do like a transcon and run across the US. There's a world record for that too. So I'll probably try to go for that and see. Either way, I want to finish because it's totally different. It's more like 60 miles a day versus it's like double, 100K versus 50K a day. So but I don't have to do it for 200 days. So that's a plus.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for coming on with me today. So much luck for the future. We'll be looking out for you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.